Welcome to Men Are the Prize, the podcast. I'm Harvey, your host. How are you? How's the week? How you feeling? Are you feeling good? Feeling motivated? Are you feeling successful? Are you getting stuff done? Do you at least have it in? Do you see the plan in front of you? I hope you do. You know, I always like to check in with you first before we get started. Um, you know what this podcast is space for you as a man to just be open and talk. And the way I feel like I can make you comfortable is for you to hear other men talking. And that's, I think, the best thing that we can do. Talking is okay. And when you hear other men doing it, it's okay. And that's why I do this. So I'm lucky enough to have another fantastic guest. Rene Garcia is my guest this week. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm excited about this.
Oh, me too. I'm glad. I love doing this podcast because I love the openness. But you, because this is your field, I think this is even a little bit better. I love this.
Yeah,
And with
man.
that said, oh, it's gonna be cool. Here is, and you know, I love a bio. So here's a bio. And this is from Mr. Garcia himself. So I'll be reading it in his voice. Yeah. It won't sound as cool as his, but I'll do the best I can. His name is Rene Garcia. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, but currently reside in North Dallas. I'm a psychotherapist and currently hold three professional licenses in Texas. I specialize in treating adult men and am hoping to continue developing skills to better treat that community. I have a beautiful fiance, Lydia, that I'm planning on marrying this year, and a 15-year-old daughter, Lexi, who makes me unbelievably happy. That just sounds like a man who's in a good space in his life. That sounds awesome. That's good. I
Yeah.
love a good bio, and I love this is a personal one. You know what you
Yeah.
do, but it was about you. My first question lately has been, what do you think? What's it like hearing somebody read your bio, hearing somebody talk about you?
Yeah, no, it's definitely uncomfortable. And I think as psychotherapists, like we focus on other people's stories and other people's journeys, right? And the way that they, what they're experiencing. And so this has been a skill I've kind of developed over the years because you kind of have to do it. You kind of have to promote yourself and you kind of have to, why would somebody want to buy your product if you aren't buying your own product? And so this kind of idea of being able to put down the things that you're good at, the things that you are a professional at, and put that on paper. And so I, give that to somebody to read. I mean, it's definitely has gotten less awkward. It still is a little awkward at first when you write these things, but at the end of the day, I mean, you talk about my daughter and my fiance. I mean, that took years to get. That didn't happen overnight, so
Right.
I'm very proud of where those relationships are because I worked really hard on them. So
That's awesome. That's good. I get a different answer from most. It's a question I've just started to ask more recently because I've read some phenomenal bio.
how
I
narcissistic
know.
are you, right?
I didn't even think about it that way, but
Yeah, yeah,
how awesome are you? Talk about it. But I
yeah.
think it's interesting. Confidence has always been a thing that I
Sure.
think men that we kind of struggle with. So I always imagine, how do you feel when you hear it? I think it's a good thing. I like when I read somebody, and I've read some long ones, and I like yours. Yours is concise, to the point, gets to it. But I've read some
Sure.
great ones, and I feel like if I had that roster of achievements, yes, I did that. I did that too. Oh yeah, I did that. I feel really good about it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You don't have to be cocky or arrogant, but you should appreciate your successes because, like you said, you put a lot of time, effort, blood, sweat, tears, all the talk to get to where you are. And what I like about it for you, we may talk about all the work and time and effort in terms of getting a degree and getting a job, but for you, it's the relationships,
Mm,
it's your marriage, and being a father. All these things, I put work into that stuff.
sure.
And I think it's good to hear that also. So I enjoyed reading your bio because, a little bit more human stuff, but it is what it is. So with all that yakking for me, we'll move on. If you've listened or watched this podcast, you know what this is. Prize is my favorite word. And for this podcast, it represents four words that I think are good characteristics of a man. So when I have a guest, I'm asking questions about him, about P, his purpose, R, or his resilience. But because I have a professional on, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I'd like these questions, if you can, if we can talk about how or what it means for a man to have purpose and how it affects his psyche, his mental state, whether he's anxiety or whatever issues he has. I want to talk about those characteristics, and maybe you can kind of
Yeah.
give us a little insight into what they mean to a mentally healthy man, if that's okay, and if that makes
Yeah, for
sense.
sure. For
All
sure.
right, awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. I think it's
Yeah, so
important.
we can start with purpose. That sounds good with
Mhm.
you. I mean,
Oh yeah, definitely. And I go into it right now. So the first letter in the word prize is P, and the word is purpose. Purpose is defined as a reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. What is purpose? What does it represent for a man for his mental health?
I mean, I think it's such a strong, what a great place to start. I mean, it's such a strong place that I think men who are struggling with mental health issues could really get a lot of benefit from. One of my favorite books that was given to me when I was in my master's program was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it's about his experience of being in a Nazi internment camp, and he saw men just obviously it was a terrible situation, but he also found men and people that would just get to a point where they just could not take it, and they would actually run and hurt themselves, or run against a fence, an electrical fence, and they would kill themselves in that way. And this was kind of his own experience of how he saw other people stick through it with resilience, and kind of find a purpose in it. And that's one of these books that I really ask a lot of young men and men that I work with to kind of check out. Obviously, it's a very heavy topic with the Holocaust, but it's also a really great kind of reminder, and asking themselves, like, what is your purpose? And the key word in there, I think a lot of people with that question, when we ask people like what your purpose is, they focus on the purpose side of that sentence. But really, to me, I want to focus on what is your individual purpose? As a Latino man, as a second generation immigrant, there are a lot of things that kind of are placed onto us, onto our shoulders, without us kind of really even asking for it. And so there tends to be this kind of things that drive our decisions. And so when we start developing our own personal purpose, what drives my goals, what drives my decision making, what is something I really want, then we get to really a strong point of authenticity. Like, what is something specifically that you want out of your life? And asking someone's purpose, I also think that's another thing that can change. My purpose early on when I first started, doing therapy professionally, was one thing. My purpose now is something completely different. And so I think it's also something that you kind of have to go in and check in with somebody, and have that conversation, and be willing to bounce ideas off them. And mostly important, that person who's listening to on the other side, to be able to support and be whimsical with you, and allow you to dream, allow you to ask questions that may not be comfortable to ask to other people. And I think that, to me, is what's so valuable about the therapeutic process, is you're working with somebody that really has no bearing in your life, and they're really there to listen to you and to give you a space and figure these things out.
Okay. When I talk to men, whether it's the coaching thing or this podcast, inevitably I get to the point where men just have a real, I don't know what the term is, problem with realizing their value, their importance, themselves. I've talked to men, and I think simple questions like, what do you do for you? What do you do to self-soothe? What do you do for fun? Life is hard.
Yeah,
Life sucks sometimes. What do you do to get away?
sure.
And when I'm hearing you talk about this, I think for men, it almost feels selfish because we're raised to provide, to take care, to make sure wife is set, kids are good, everything is taken care of. We usually aren't the focus of our providing. So when you said what about you? I ask men that all the time. What about you? What do you do for you? Why? I mean, obviously, social things. You're Hispanic. I'm Haitian. So I'm from a Caribbean patriarchal super society. But
Sure.
is there a therapeutic, or is there another reason why we men find it so hard to focus on ourselves? Whether it's even just our physical health. We don't want to go see a doctor. We
Yeah.
don't look into ourselves. Is there anything you can think of that kind of
Yeah, I mean,
triggers that?
well, I think a lot of times, in my experience, is that I think men are taught how to be men by other men that they admire. And so if this person that you admire or want to replicate your own life after is not going to a therapist, is not taking their PTO, their vacation time, is not, is taking as much overtime work as they can, is not sitting down and playing Legos with their kid, then why would they do something different? And so, this kind of big thing, like a visibility of seeing men have these conversations, therapeutic conversations, dressing up with their daughters, playing catch with their sons, their kids, like going and actually showing their personal side to them versus this kind of just, I pay the bills and that's it. That to me, you just end up developing a different depth of relationship with these people in your lives. And you get to, yes, there's a provider side to it. And yes, there's that, the lights got to be paid, the light bill's got to get paid, no
Right.
one's gonna, I think that's something as, not, I think it's easy to criticize older generations and say, man, they never talked to us and they just never sat down. But yeah, that's because they had to buy food. Somebody had to go get food. You know what I'm saying? And so to go easy on them, but also know that you can also do those things and prioritize time off and prioritize interpersonal relationships with not only partners, but your family members. And so I think, to answer your question more directly, I just think it's that sometimes just guys don't know that they can do some of these things, that they can look outside of just this one purpose-driven role that this family expects from them. And I just have never, I don't want to say never, I would say I rarely meet a family member or partner that is like, yeah, we want him to keep working and not ask us how our day is. We want him to be, working 60 hours a week and not, ask us how we're feeling. No, all partners want this. Virtually all, I don't want to say all, virtually all partners, virtually all kids would love to have that interpersonal time with these men in their lives.
Good. I agree. I guess, I think a lot of men feel that pressure of doing it, but
Sure.
there's a hierarchy. There's what we feel like we need, like you said, the light bill has to be taken care of. If I'm sitting here playing Barbie with my daughter or G.I. Joe with yeah, I'm dating myself. But in, but if my lights are not on, where are we playing?
Right.
We're going to prioritize what we think is important. And I
Sure.
think what we're getting into now in the times that we live in now, that we men are more emotional, more vulnerable, all this is kind of changing. So now we're getting to a point where that emotional state is kind of leveling with the basic financial mortgage, car note, lights, power, all that good stuff. And I think we're on a better path. But because you mentioned something and I kind of responded to it, I'm completely going off the point, but I think it's great.
It's
A
fine.
lot of a lot of these conversations, I get into masculinity.
Yeah.
And is there a difference between the masculinity of a Black man or a Hispanic man versus a Caucasian man? Do we define it differently? Do we feel it differently? And I'm sure I'm sure you speak to all kinds. Is there a difference in terms of the masculinity of men and how we see each other and how we see masculinity from different eyes, because we're
Yeah.
different, obviously?
Yeah, for sure. So one of my licenses is I'm a marriage and family therapist, and the state, all these licenses are the state of Texas. And one of the things that makes that license so specific is that we work in systems, and we talk a lot about systems theory in that license. And I would say that I agree with you, and it's dependent on the system that this person exists in. And so there are systems where there tends to be dominant men in the Latino culture. There's machismo, there's marianismo, and all these different kind of cultural norms that we expect from each other. But there's also cultures of our households, and how does our household function? I would venture to say I grew up in a very matriarchal household, to where it wasn't very domineering. And my dad was a great man, is a great man, and I've never seen him drunk, never seen him, yell or swing. He has his things, but I would say that, I to me, this is going to sound stupid, but masculinity is almost like salsa at a restaurant. You just got to go and taste them, and they're all different, and you don't know which one you're going to get, but essentially it's there, and you have to understand it, and you have to know, what am I dealing with when you encounter it? And so there are, I am trying to professionally move away from the words toxic masculinity, because I do think that it can be pretty pathologizing early on for young men who may be experiencing really other significant traumas, such as PTSD, severe anxiety, maybe undiagnosed mental health symptoms that are pretty severe. But I do think, yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of going all over the place, but I agree with you that there's just, I think masculinity can be a lot of different things. And I don't think it's very clearly defined, but I do think when we encounter it, we start comparing it to the form of masculinity that I know, the masculinity that I'm familiar with. And I can say, and I'm not too cool with this, but this version I'm a little bit cooler with, and so that's why I kind of joke. It's kind of like salsa. I know I have my favorite salsa, but just because I have this one, it's not bad, but there's some ones that I just don't want to touch, and I will never go close by. So fun little comparison there.
Oh, I like that. I understood it completely. I really at that. And just because I'm going to dive deeper, when talking about masculinity,
Sure.
in your opinion, and this doesn't have to be a professional one, this is just Rene. Does sexuality need to be part of the masculinity discussion?
Oh, 1,000%, 1,000%. I think sexuality, understanding your own sexual journey, your sexual power, not being, I grew up in a, I'll go ahead and date myself here. I mean, I was, I started picking up porn when I was back in the mid 90s on CompuServe. Like, this was back, when you had to dial up, and so I was really kind of warped very early on. And a lot of my contemporaries, the people around me, were as well too. And I think what happens is when that becomes the norm, you kind of don't naturally discover who you are, because it's so compared to everything. There's some really extreme examples, and so I think sexuality 100% needs to be part of it, not only for men raising young men, but also for men raising young girls and young women. And I think, ultimately we have a lot of non-binary kids as well. My kid, when she started having her period, she started working on this, or using this app called Flow. And it's a very popular app, and women can track their cycles and stuff like that. But it has a chat feature, an anonymous chat feature, and she could talk to other females and non-binary people experiencing their period. And she raved about it. She's like, this is the best thing I ever had, being able to talk to somebody. And yes, I was able to talk to her too, but also giving her the space that she can have this conversation with others, and she can be her authentic self. And so again, I'm rambling over here, but I think this conversation of sexuality needs to start at home, understanding who you are, the things that you've been in, the things that have maybe crossed your mind, how you have connected with your sexual self, your partner, and especially if you have kids, they're going through all this same thing. And it's kind of, it's kind of like crack cocaine, all these apps and these things that are around that are influencing these kids. And so I really feel terrible for them. And I think parents are very quick to say these apps are ruining our kids, but the kids aren't making the apps. These are adults making the apps for the kids to get hooked to. And so you can't get too mad at the kids. I mean, they're simply the consumers of some tech guru sitting around a table in San Francisco right now of asking, how can we get these kids connected to it? And so we got to ask questions. We got to be willing to hear things that may be uncomfortable. We got to be able to provide spaces that people can have these conversations. We are willing to have the conversations with them and share those experiences. And unfortunately, there's a lot of sexual trauma that we experience as young kids. What used to be the, hey, stay away from that house. I mean, now that guy's a sexual predator and has to identify as a pedophile to the, so it's a lot different than it was 40, 50 years ago. And so these men have to change with the times. And so again, to answer your question, sexuality is 100% important. We have to be willing to have the conversations with ourselves, and especially with our partners, and more importantly, our kids.
I hear you. And I agree. I've got four kids. So I've got an 18-year-old son
That
and
explains
three
the
daughters.
beard, the gray beard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm only 22, but
That's what it's,
I have an 18-year-old son and I have three daughters. A
that's awesome, man.
16-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old, and an 8-year-old.
Nice.
So it is just this continuous flow of estrogen through this house and emotions and moods and all this. And me and my son are just navigating, just trying to keep it through. But we're family and they don't like each other and siblings and all this fun stuff. But
It's natural.
yeah, it's natural. And yes, you just kind of have to try to keep it level and don't let it
Sure.
get too crazy, but it's fun. How do you like being a dad?
Oh man. Um, yeah, I love being a dad. I tell her that all the time. I go, Lexi, I love being your dad. My story's a little bit different. Her mom got pregnant when she was 21. I was 23. She was not planned. And we were barely together, but we made the really wise decision at that time to say, I think it'd be best for us to raise this child as co-parents. And so we never married. We never tried to make that relationship work. But I think really both families were like, yeah, if y'all don't love each other, then don't do it. And so that was a really hard conversation with my parents. I'll never forget that. But they immediately, I'll save the details, but they immediately came over and my mom was like, we're going to love this kid no matter what, and they have done so for the last, 16 years, about, 15, she's about to be 16 this year. So I will tell you that at the very first couple years, I was 23. I didn't know, my ass from a hole in the ground. And so, it was very strange waters. I was in a fraternity. And so my friends were out doing, things, and I was doing my things too some days, but then there were days where I was changing diapers and had dresses around. And for many years, I didn't feel, I think when you're in a position where you're the non-custodial parent, there's a lot of feelings that I experienced because I really wanted to be involved. And we're at a point now where for the last many years that, Lexi's mom will say, I look back and you did more than what some biological dads do. And so I really feel pride in that. And there's many years I didn't feel like I was a good enough dad. But I think that was a lot of my insecurities. That was obviously I was young, 23 is a child. You don't know what you're doing. And I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And it took many years for me to kind of get secure in what kind of father I was going to be. But, one thing my mom said that I'll never forget in her wisdom, and I think it's very true, and I think it's still true to this day, is, you cannot depend on Lexi's mom to establish the relationship that you have with your daughter. That's your job. And that really resonated with me because there were times where I was very upset, very angry at some issues that maybe her mom and I were experiencing, but that wasn't her fault. That wasn't my daughter's fault. We're the adults. We get paid the big bucks. We got to deal with that stuff our own, and she doesn't deserve that. And so I have been a part of her life, actively involved with her life. I got my master's in 2012, and the goal was for us to eventually meet back in the DFW area. She had moved out East Texas. I was in Houston. And so 2014, had an opportunity to transfer up from Houston to Dallas, and it was just, the best decision I could have done because it wasn't distance anymore. I was right there. I could go have, lunch with her on Fridays and, take her out for date nights and have weekends with her. And so it was just, and I still involved with today, in fact, I had to reschedule everything because she had a band concert this week. And so I just love being a dad, and she's a great kid, and she's, I can't talk too much about her cause I'll be in a puddle over here. So I'll try and keep that tight, but she's just the best. And I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm outgoing and cannot stop talking, but she's an introvert and she's just pensive, but she's like a sponge. And I admire her. I respect her. I love her. And seeing her grow into a woman is really one of the best joys. And then also seeing her with my fiance. That's another thing I can't even begin to start talking about because I'll crumble right there. But her and my fiance Lydia are just like peas in a pod, you know. And so seeing them work, yeah, see, here it comes, seeing them go together, seeing the relationship they've built together, and the time that Lydia has put in to get to know her is just it's hard to watch, because yeah, I gotta hold it in. I gotta walk the dogs. I was like, you know what, y'all stay here, watch something, I'm gonna go walk the dogs, put this in. But you know, yeah, they're the best. She really is the best.
I understand everything. What at the beginning you said something, and just to be clear, it's clear I'm older than you. I was born in 74, so I'm 48. And you were talking about that hard conversation that you had to have with your parents.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I didn't get married until I was 34,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife already had two kids.
Mm.
But the last two kids are biologically mine, and we didn't plan on her birth either. So at 34, I had that hard conversation. No matter how old you are, I went up to a Haitian mother and what? You
Yeah,
got her pregnant? And she played it off really nice while she was there. And I'm like,
yeah.
you faking. This is some bullshit right here. You don't feel this at all. Like the first time I see you without her, you go, and it was
Yeah.
on. And I hear you. So
Well,
everything you said resonated. Oh, it was crazy. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I'll tell you a quick. I'll tell you a quick story. So this is a funny story. So in college, I had a situation happen to where I kind of had a falling out with a lot of my high school buddies, and so I went to the University of North Texas. You'll see the flag, right? The University of North Texas, UNT.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't have like, I didn't feel like I had a lot of close friends, but I was in the marching band, and I got to meet this guy who just happened to be from South Texas, where my father was born and raised. It was Brownsville, Texas. And he was just the funniest dude. And we really got along really well. I latched onto him because I didn't really feel I had a lot of friends. And then he had a best friend that also went to UNT. So then these two guys just became my circle. Well, later on, they both ended up coming out to me. One was gay and the other one was bisexual. And so what went from kind of broy kegger parties, my life quickly turned to nothing, but I was really involved in the gay community for a couple of years when I was in college. And they were great, and I always loved them, and everybody loved us. We were always fun at parties, and we always had a good time. And my mom would come up and visit us, and she loved them. Everybody loved them. They're just great guys. And so when I ended up telling them about Lexi, I had said, hey, I want to talk to you guys about something. And so it's like the whole day, and I was anxious the whole day. And we finally sit down, and I tell them, and my mom's like, okay. Wow, we thought you were going to tell us that you were gay. And so that was like, no. Which I thought was
Oh my
hilarious. It was
God.
like, mom, no, I
I know.
appreciate that. You know, that's I
Oh,
love those guys. They're my best friends, but I am not gay.
oh,
And in
no.
fact,
Oh,
you're going to be a grandmother. That's the bigger
oh,
thing.
I'm with you. I think about it. I honestly, and my mom's not that person anymore, but I feel like if I had sat her down and told her, you know what? I'm gay, she would have taken it a lot worse than the whole I'm having a baby thing. And I'm like, yes, that's so true.
Oh
I
yeah,
love parents. Oh, that's so true. Oh my
yeah,
God. We really connect on a lot of these because I'm a stepfather, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
And that relationship,
Mm,
and especially with girls,
yeah,
I'm in like a real, it's not a battle, but it's just this battle of wits with my 16-year-old she
yeah.
knows everything already. She knows it all. And I'm doing my best to help. And
Oh
for
yeah,
me, it's like I can help you. I'm here for you. But I've kind of, I don't know if I've built this barrier, but it's kind of here. I am dad, but I'm kind of not, because
sure.
real dad is out in the distance, and he's not a vet. He's not even a part of this. But I don't know. There's something to me, the relationship, there's some space because I can't really be, because there's somebody else who really is, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well,
So
yeah, well, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
well, we can actually, that's such a good topic. I mean, we could probably spend a whole episode on this, is that, the role of stepfathers in relationship to fathers, biological fathers, in relationship to the child, because I think that was something that I struggled with a little bit early on. Lexi's stepdad's a great guy. And, I think early on, there was obviously some intimidation there, and, asking, what could how could I experience, what would my experience be with him around? What was the difference? And really, I recall very clearly, the first time that she called her stepdad just dad, just dad. She called him
Mm,
dad in front of me. And, a lot of that was a knife to my heart, and it was really hard to hear. And, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but the resilience thing, that speaks out to me a lot is, I really felt like, I felt a lot of emotions, a lot of anger, a lot of pain. But then I had to take a step back and ask myself, okay, like, this is a man who is openly and willingly wanting to love and support and house and feed my daughter. Like, he didn't have to do this, but he's choosing to do so. And he's doing it so good that my daughter decided to honor him with the title of dad. And so I had to kind of reframe it a little bit, is that, again, she's a child. She felt secure enough and connected to want to allow this person to be a part of her life. And who am I to sit here and say, no, no, Lex, you hate this guy. All right. No, I'm the only dad. You only listen to me, that kind of thing. And so I would kind of pose that back to you and ask yourself, like, if you're that that person who's away from your kid is deciding to do that, right? Whatever happened, they're making that decision. But it's your decision to stay around them and to show them all that you can do as far as love, support, security. Hey, let's go grab some Starbucks together. Let's go just get a drink. Let's go get some, let's go get some snack. Let's go hang out. And how that time to me feels so much more important versus, hey, now what's your title? Okay, what's the legal form here? Like, I mean, yeah, there's gonna be a time and place for that, but not in the household. Lexi has a half sister and a half brother. She doesn't say, "Oh, good morning, half sister. Good morning, half brother." She doesn't say that. She calls them by their name. She gives them hugs. And so titles are titles. And I get that. There's a place for that. But I think, again, if you're fulfilling that role and you're doing the best you can and you're getting to know them, I mean, they notice that. They're able to pick up on that. And it was hard, and I get through my own emotions, but that's my ego. That has nothing to do with her, has nothing to do with her stepdad. It's all me.
mm. I had no intention of bringing that up, but hey, clearly you've done this before. This is I'm just bringing this stuff out. But and,
Yeah,
and
don't
we
bring a
can.
therapist on a podcast. It's
No,
the worst decision ever. We're gonna talk
what do
about.
you think the problem is? No, we.
I got my
What we
own
can
question. I got my own questions tonight, Harvey. I don't care about your questions. This is my question.
we will keep it moving. You mentioned the word, so I'm just going to bring it up. The next
Yeah.
letter in the word prize is R. The word is resilience, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. How important is resilience in a mentally intelligent or mentally comfortable man?
Yeah. I think there's got to be a definition of what resilience is to people. And I think a lot of the times we tend to assume that men in a very masculine type of arena look at resilience as who's the toughest, who's the baddest, who's the biggest. But for me, I think of, when I think of a professional, I think of consistency. I don't think of perfection. I just think of consistency. So a resilient person to me in caring for their mental health is being able to recognize when mental health is suffering and being able to apply coping skills and processes that allow him to remain consistent in caring for those mental health issues. It isn't about not being sad. It's about, when I'm sad, what do I do? When I'm anxious, what do I do? When I'm grieving, what do I do? When I succeed, what do I do? And when I fail, what do I do? It's not about not doing those things. Resiliency can also be dependent on the situation, right? Like, what situation do you feel you're going through at this point that needs resiliency applied? Maybe there's some things where you need to, you know, here's the great example. The easy one is, let's say a loved one passes in your life, right? So you're going through grieving. There's a grieving process. There's sadness, there's bargaining, there's anger, there's isolation, all these different stages of grieving.
Mhm.
But it isn't about going through those things step by step. It's recognizing which stage you're in and allowing yourself to be there. It isn't assuming that it's going to be the rest of your life you're going to be there, that you shouldn't be there, that you should be able to get over this. It's recognizing where you're at in that moment and being able to honor that experience. And so resiliency to me is just a really great topic. And I think it gets kind of a bad reputation sometimes of like the tough dudes who don't let anything bother them. And I think to me, that's just, to me, if I don't know, to me, that's just unrealistic. I just don't know how realistic this idea of a person who never feels anything and pushes all the things down and just keeps trucking along. Like I just can't. To me, it seems unrealistic.
I agree. I agree. It's I really like how you describe that. That's one of the best ways I've heard resilience, because we have a tendency to just push everything in. We'll just deal with it. I hurt myself, rub some dirt on it, and keep it moving.
Sure.
To be able to, instead of stopping the feeling, but to feel it and deal with it is such a great way to deal with it. I like that. I'm stealing, not that you came up with that, but I'm going to steal it because I like the way you describe that.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's important. I really, and a lot of stuff that you're saying, I'm really taking for myself, because you're talking to me without literally talking to me, because
Yeah.
I think about that. But we're gonna keep it moving. We're gonna
Yeah.
skip the I.
Okay.
The next letter in the word prize is Z. The word is zeal, enthusiastic devotion. And I feel
Mhm.
like at times this kind of goes along with purpose, but I'll ask you, how important is important for a man to have something that is not his work and not his family, something for him to do that he loves just for him?
Man, you're asking this question at a perfect time in my life, and I'll tell you why. Summer of 21, I got told that my A1C was in the double digits. And so anybody who's not a medical professional, this is glucose. This means you're basically on the road to type 2 diabetes. My paternal grandmother died of diabetes. Diabetes runs in my father's side. And so I immediately just freaked the fuck out. And I was like, I've always been a bigger guy, but my labs have always been solid. But this was the first time we were coming out of the pandemic, and I was like, I was not monitoring what I was eating and was going through a lot of stress, and it just was in double digits, and it just really made me terrified. So I started working with a registered dietitian, and I was 30, I was maybe 36, 37 at the time, 37. And I just didn't know what I was going to do, but I wanted to add some type of exercise component to my life. Now, as you can imagine, with the pandemic, a lot of stuff had been closed. I wasn't really doing, yes, you could work out at home, but it wasn't really, I don't know. I didn't really do like that. So I started looking online for martial art places, and I started looking at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there just happens to be a school close by that I wanted to check out. And the guy who answered the phone was, I was very cautious. I was a band kid. I hated athlete guys, jocks. I just didn't grow up around those dudes. All my friends in college were gay, so it's not like, I had a different lifestyle back then. And so I didn't really have like an aggressive type of side of my life. And so I started doing that. It was really tough, but it was also something that I was almost 40 years old here, and it was brand new. And I really thought to myself, I hadn't done anything brand new in my life for a very long time. I started getting into cycling, I always liked, beer, going drinking beers with buddies, but I hadn't really done anything that I just had no knowledge about. And that was my thing. And I went from having, in the therapy world, I'm a master's, I'm 10 years in this game. Like, I have all this experience, but on the mats, I was a child. I was a child. I was getting choked out by 115-pound IT professionals, and I'm 6'1", 270 pounds. And so I'm like, how is this happening? And so it was a way for me to tap into a part of my life that I had never done before. And I've learned a lot about myself doing so. So in that example of zeal, I think being able to place yourself enthusiastically into a world that you know nothing about takes a lot of courage and bravery. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke up my ass, but I really want you to think about is that it's different, it's hard, it's challenging. And I think a lot of guys want to grow up and feel not challenged. We want to be the best that we're at. We want to continue to achieve, even if we don't want to be the, we just want to keep moving forward and building up in something that is comfortable for us. And so that place of being uncomfortable is very strange and very frightening and can be very challenging. And so I think it's not only having zeal in your life for something that's really important that keeps you motivated, but also zeal for something that challenges you and something that you've never done before. If you have done this, really athletic stuff and martial arts and stuff before, pick up an instrument, learn how to play the guitar, learn how to code. Coding, there's a lot of beauty and abstractness in coding and be able to create websites and stuff like that. I think having stuff like that is such a wonderful thing. And especially on top of like doing something with a partner or with a loved one or a friend or your child, like having something specifically that, I mean, we have to add in this extra sauce in your life, And so I think the zeal is not only just there for your mental health, but just kind of for your overall happiness. We're planning a wedding right now, and we're kind of cutting down. Okay, what do I need to cut down as far as finances and stuff? But Lydia's been great, and she's been like, keep going to jujitsu. Like, you love it. It's something that I have never done anything workout consistent like this before in my life. And it's been something I've gotten a lot of joy out of, and she knows how important it is. And so it's something we're willing to cut back a couple of meals in a month to save up for, because it means that much to me. So I think the zeal is absolutely a necessity in men's development.
That's amazing. Like, our stories are scarily similar. I'm also a type 2 diabetic. I am a diabetic. And for me, I mean, I guess you went and you got tested and you saw that A1C. For me, I had an incident where my wife was pregnant with my second biological daughter. I was about to turn 40. I had planned this paintball adventure. I'm 40, I'm going to go do something athletic, man, go out there, hang out, whatever. But I wasn't feeling good. I was feeling kind of run down, but my wife was on bed rest. So I basically so feeding the kids, doing whatever. And everything was going well. I guess I'm dealing with it. I'm a man, whatever. I'll sleep, rub some dirt on it, keep it moving. I showered to go to work one day and collapsed. My blood sugar was over 500.
Oh my gosh.
I was bad. And my wife drove me to the ER. I spent 8 days in the hospital, 3 of them in the ICU, because I wasn't taking care of myself, because I wasn't taking care of me. I was watching, because my wife, that child, who in most cases would not survive, but she came through and she's awesome, super smart, and chaos running. But she got up and drove me to the hospital. So I spent all my time, don't get out of bed. They said don't get up. And she wasn't listening and all that. Meanwhile, I was this close to organ failure. Like, it's crazy. So when you're talking about that, I'm like, I'm Haitian, I'm Black, or predisposed to stuff like that. So it's even more important to take care of that. So I'm hearing you talk about all this, and I'm like, my God, this is just me. And for me,
Yeah.
for me, the gym became the thing I like to do, because I didn't work out that much. I'm like, I got to get healthy. I got to do something. So I got to the gym. I'm like, it's awesome. And now podcasting is my new zealous thing, and I really enjoy doing this. But a lot of men that I talk to don't have an outlet. They
Yeah.
don't do something for themselves.
Yeah, no, it's so important. I think it's such a necessity, and it can be anything. Like you said, this hobby, the podcasting thing is such a great thing. Golf, cycling. I mean, like, there's just so many things that the job that, and I think that's one of the main differences between like previous generations and our generations. Like, if somebody were to ask, like, my dad, like my dad's, is in his mid 70s, retired, to say, Carlos, like, tell me about yourself. And and I'm not going to speak for him, but I would say more than likely he would say, oh, well, I was an accountant, I worked in the oil industry, it would be these titles that were related to their job and their experiences. And because again, it was just such a connection to their identity. And I think that as men, we do let our work sometimes identify ourselves, but that doesn't need to be that. There's so much more to you than just those job titles. And I think these extracurricular activities, these things that kind of add joy to life. And some of us are lucky enough to make that be our profession. And that's a really great thing. I think this is a study years ago that I read, is that, some of the happiest people that really show kind of off the charts joy in their profession and minimal depression and anxiety tends to be athletic trainers, people who work with people in the gym and work with people on goals. They tend to have like off the chart job satisfaction. And so again, there are some people that can turn that joy and that zeal into a profession, but until that time, that doesn't mean you can't add these things in or make a place for them. You just have to be able to find something that fits and that you enjoy. Going to concerts, going to, I mean, the list can go on and on and on, but I think, yeah, you nailed it. There's got to be some zeal in there. There's got to be something that makes you look towards that time being spent and prioritize that time amongst everything else. And so I don't know. I just love that idea of zeal.
Me too. I just like the word zeal because when I was trying to come up with this for prize, I'm like, Z, it fits. I love zeal. By the way, this is getting really creepy. My dad is a certified public accountant also. This is like, who are you, bro? This is getting
I'm your chubby Mexican cousin. You know what I'm saying, man?
it's amazing. Yes, this is parallel way too much, but it's great. Um E is the last letter in the word prize, and that represents expectation. Expectation is defined as a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. When you have a man as a patient, and there's going to be a multitude of reasons why a man is going to see you. No, and it's a hard question to ask because it's every man is going to be specific, but in general, the time you've spent with a man, I guess, helping him in whatever, what is your expectation for that man when the time has come and you guys will no longer be working together? What is
Yeah.
that man? What should he expect from the relationship you guys have built and the time spent with each other?
Yeah, the discharge time is really important for a therapist, and sometimes it happens quickly and abruptly. Sometimes it is a slow process, but essentially, a good therapist, in my opinion, will say, my job is to work myself out of a job, right? And so I really want to get to a point to where my clients don't need me. And when a client gets to a point to where they're discharging the expectation is to be aware of what were the things that got me into therapy and what skills that I build in order that maybe therapy is not needed at this time, and to be able to implement those skills on a daily basis. The expectation of also ending working with a therapist, to me, is also you being able to recognize when there are experiences in your life that you are very well equipped for and experiences that you are not so well equipped for, and being able to ask for help outside of there, bringing people into your struggle, being able to communicate with others your experience, and to be able to ask for help. And so I think, the expectations can range all over the place, but to me, I think that application of skill set is a really big one. How are you? And the term you hear a lot, the phrase you hear a lot in the mental health world is like the tools in your toolbox, the tools in your toolbox. And I think it's an okay metaphor because, every toolbox needs a hammer, every toolbox needs a wrench, every toolbox needs a ruler, that kind of thing. But there's also a lot of tools that you may not have that you may need. And so recognizing when you can use those tools and those places, and recognizing when you may need some other tools that you may not have.
So I know for a lot of men, it's hard to ask for help in pretty much any physical, financial, whatever, but especially when it comes to maybe getting therapy and finding a therapist.
Sure.
So that's hard. Do you find it for men that now it's hard? Let's say I then have gone to therapy and I've gone and I've spent some time and I now have a full toolbox and ready to go. Do you find it that men think it's harder to come back after they've gotten therapy? Are they of the opinion I'm fixed?
Yeah.
I spent all this time. Is it harder? I don't know, recidivism. I wonder if that really fits. But is it
Yeah.
harder to get one or to go back to one?
Yeah, I that's a great question. I have had the clients say, I have worked with years on this person, and they know the lingo, right? They know what, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT is a really common one, or they know about EMDR, like these different types of like theoretical approaches and processes that we use as clinicians. And they'll say, yeah, I worked in CBT and this, and I there it's so to answer your question, I see a lot. I see both. I see people that are reluctant to go back, but then I see people that are really quick to go back. The people that are really quick to go back are sometimes tough to work with because they're in a lane, and they are set in a lane to say, this is what I want. And if you're not going to give it to me, then I need to go somewhere else. And one could say, oh man, that hurts because I really want to I want to help everybody. But another thought process of that is, you know what? I'm not the therapist for you. I would like to recommend somebody else, that kind of thing. And so regardless of it, I think once the shell is cracked of recognizing that a therapy, like the thing I always tell clients is there's a lot worse places to be than the therapy room. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot scarier places to be. Once they recognize that you're a human being, it's not anything you've seen in them. I've yet to see a an honest media representation of the therapeutic process in any media. I feel like it's very different. And then on top of it, it's very different per clinician. Clinicians have different styles, different types of therapy they can provide. And so I think once that shell is cracked, that it's not a scary place, I do think a lot more people are willing to come back, which is a really great thing. And that's what we always want to have. I just think sometimes when people do decide to come back, it's also being able to be flexible about what those expectations are. There's a lot of expertise out there, and there's a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of education out there, and a lot of people think that therapy is really easy and this should be simple, and I don't think it is. I think it can be very complicated, it can be very complex, and it can also be something that you never intended it to be. We might uncover things that you never even thought about that you were going to come in and talk about, but really that's what the problem is. And so you have to be willing to go down those paths.
Excellent answer. Excellent. Yes. Excuse me. The last real letter in the word prize is the I. And when I do this on the podcast, it doesn't represent a word. It represents the man that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
For this particular questioning, because it's a bit different because we're kind of general with it, I asked the men to get rid of everything, the shackles, all the stuff, all the things that you are, and describe themselves. Who are you? The typical podcast question. That psychotherapist, I'm a podcaster, I know nothing,
Yeah.
but who are you? What's a healthy answer to that question? When I ask a person, who are they? If you can think about it, what things should they be thinking about themselves to
Yeah.
describe themselves to somebody else?
Um, there's a great book written by Harry Gulishin oh my gosh, I'm going blank with the other therapist. She was the dean at my school, Harleen Anderson. Good God. And they use the metaphor of the onion, and a lot of people are like, oh, like, people are like layers, and it's like, no, shut the fuck up. That's not what I mean. The onion represents that a person is essentially like an onion, that they have a lot of different identities represented by those layers of the onion. Each one of those layers has power in their lives, and how they represent each one of those systems or identities in their life is ranked as the most insignificant being in the middle, but the most significant being on the outside. So, for instance, one of my inner layers is that I am from Houston, but one of my outer layers is that I'm a father. Yes, the Houston Astros won the World Series this year, and I was extremely excited about that. But if I were watching the World Series and my daughter was in a car accident with her friends, I would immediately shut off that TV screen and there'd be flames coming out of my tires to go check on her, because that's the identity that means the most to me. So to answer your question, whenever you say, like, what's the correct response to that, it's really irrelevant, what anybody else thinks. You got to ask yourself, what are my layers? What are the things that make me me? It isn't just one. It isn't just two. There's a lot of great things about you, and I want to know about them. I want to know about each one of them. Each one of them is important because they're a part of you, and you wouldn't identify them if it was not. And there's parts of these layers that are probably really shitty and you're not proud of and have probably caused some shame. But if we don't really pick at them and get to know them and really provide a space where people feel comfortable, that's what I always tell clients. The therapy space is a place where you can feel comfortably uncomfortable. To be able to process these things, we have to get to know that side of you. So there's not a correct answer. The answer is, I want to hear every single one of those layers until you get exhausted. And then we're going to get to know those layers.
Great. I've asked every man who I've done this podcast with, including myself, because the first episode I did, I made myself the subject. Yeah. And I get a different answer. Some of my favorites I like. It sounds like a definitive question. Who are you? Which means I guess in my mind, if I'm hearing the question, I know who I am, and it's this. The best answers I get are, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure myself out. Mm-hmm. I don't exactly know. And recognizing that life is this continuous evergreen journey that will really kind of never end. And I'm still trying to figure out who I am. I've always found that interesting.
Yeah.
But thank you for answering the questions in the prize mantra. I appreciate that. I have one more question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And I apologize in advance because this is not the intention to get extra emotional. But as a father, it's probably the thing I love most about walking this earth is being a dad, because I'm a stay-at-home dad of 4. That's awesome. Job.
That's a dream. It's a dream.
It is. Yeah, it is. I got a wife who's doing really well, so I can stay here and I can podcast and do whatever. So it works out. But I've been talking to men, and I've gotten to the point when I get to fathers and I ask them this, especially if you have a daughter, and you do have one. Mm-hmm. If I was able to talk to Lexi, and by the way, my youngest daughter's name is Lexine. So this is a problem. I don't know if you've been looking in my window or whatever, but like, this is too crazy.
Yeah.
If I was able to talk to Lexi, how would she describe you to me? What is her daddy like? She
would say I'm hilarious. I take great pride in making her laugh. That's one of my favorite things to do. She'd say I'm hilarious. She would say that I'm curious about her life. And, we were traveling through Colorado, and we were driving, and the subject came up about, a person in our lives, and their biological dad just wasn't in their life. And this person went on to like be in the armed forces, married, had a kid, never arrested, like a beautiful life, for lack of a better term. And I was talking with Lexi and Lydia in the car, and I was telling Lexi, that's just so sad that this biological parent made the choice not to be in this person's life. I mean, that's sad. And Lexi chimed in and she goes, that's insane, because you have always been such a huge part of my life. I wouldn't even know how to experience that, and I just fucking lost it, dude. I could
Let me-
not. Yeah, I wasn't expecting her to say that. I didn't prompt her
Oh
to
my
say
God.
that.
Ooh.
But yeah, it just killed me. But it's also a testament that she's watching. She's watching when I prioritize time. She's watching when I, you know, listen. She's watching when I'm asking questions. She's watching when I ask her about her grades, you know. So I really think those are the things you know, and it's just you know, I always love it when fraternity brothers are they get a girl as a baby, and that, you know, one of their partners are pregnant, and it just makes me laugh. I'm just like, this is the best. This guy needed a daughter. I have a friend, buddy of mine, and I messaged him because I know his partner was pregnant, and I go, "You're gonna get a daughter, dude." And he's like, "Nah, nah, nah." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. You are getting." And sure enough, she was, and I called it, and I said, God, if anybody in this world needed a daughter, it's you, man. And so I've just learned a lot about myself. And I empathize with her a lot. And yeah, we have an amazing relationship. That's something I'm very proud of. She knows who I am, and I make it a conscious decision to work really hard every time we're together to get to know her and for her to get to know me. And so I will continue to do that as long as I can.
That's awesome. Since I love being a dad so much, I love hearing other dads speak.
It's great, man. It's
It is.
tough. It's
Oh,
hard.
no doubt. Oh, no doubt. Because it's just different. There's different ways of being, and it's not to downplay being the father of a son. But when I talk to men and ask them that question about their daughter, a lot of times I can really put together the kind of man they want to be
Yeah.
because their daughter is going to say it about them. When I
Mm.
get a guy if he answers that question honestly, either she would think this and this about me, and I'll get guys say, and she might say that I could be better at this or better at this, and it's really you're describing yourself through the voice of your daughter,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
special connection with our girls, and I have three of them, and it's so when I ask that question, it's I'm thinking about it in the back of my mind. What would
Sure.
my 16-year-old probably doesn't love me that much right now, but it's all right. I understand that, but I appreciate you answering that question.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries.
No problem. This was excellent. I wanted to have a therapist on here to talk about what it's like being a man and being open to talking about things.
Yeah.
And so where can men
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah, you know, I do my best to stay up to date with social media, but probably where I'm, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Where I'm spending most time right now is TikTok. At Men Do Therapy is probably where you could find the most up to date content. At Men Do Therapy. I also you find my Instagram at Men Do Therapy, and my private practice is Garcia Mental Health on Instagram. Right now, I'm seeing clients in the state of Texas that either in person in North Dallas or online. I have clients sometimes throughout the Texas area. So if anybody's looking for a good therapist, shoot me a message. I'd love to help out.
All right, fantastic. All that information will be in the episode notes. Thank you so much for talking with me and answering these questions. I thoroughly, thoroughly appreciate it. It's good to it's obviously it's a male voice every time I talk, but to have a professional male voice is even better. So I appreciate your expertise and your time through this. This
Well,
was
I appreciate honestly, I'll tell you this. I appreciate this episode. I appreciate what you're doing. I think creating spaces like this to where it's in a strong direction of men, because that's what I tell people. Like I support men on their journey to mental wellness. And sometimes that ending can look very different from other people. And so I think media like yours is unbelievably important and salient at this point. And I don't know, man, I just wish you the best with the show. I think it was awesome.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And that's been somewhat my intention to try to help men in some way. And I guess I'll end with this. Like I said, thank you to the men out there who've been listening or watching. I hope you're going to have a great week. I hope you're coming off of a great week. What I want you to remember, life is tough. Shit happens. It gets tough. And sometimes when we are at our lowest, we make decisions that we don't, especially us men. we try to end our lives a lot more than women do, and that's something that sticks with me. So every time I do an episode, I want to remind you of a few things: that you are a special person, that you are valuable, that there is somebody waiting to see you right now, somebody who's waiting to hear your voice, to feel your presence when you walk in, to hear your laughter, to get a hug from you. Somebody cares. Don't let life beat you down. Stick it out, because we all need you and we appreciate you. Thank you to my guest, Mr. Garcia. Thank you for listening. Thank you for Chris McGriff, who does my intro and my outro. It's been a pleasure. Never, ever forget, sir, that you are the man and you are the prize. Have a good week.